It is very windy today. We're doing a vintage Rachel Writes video, which is kind of weird because I'm filming this on my computer, so I'm like looking at my face like really in depth. It's like giving Zoom call. I haven't made a video in a while. I don't even know if I'm gonna post this or if I'm just filming this for myself, and it's very windy, so the audio is bad. No degree yet, no school, no routine, no audio quality. Writing has been weird. I have been very afraid. Car said, hey, I've been very afraid. I haven't been this afraid of writing in a long time, which is funny because I am one of the most fearful people I know. You know that Hannibal quote where, let me just get autistic for a second. You know that Hannibal quote? Alana's like, what drives Will? And like whoever she's talking to is fear or whatever. So like that's me. I am Will Graham. Oh geez. This is not starting out the way that it was supposed to at 4:16 p.m. while it's windy in Toronto. But yeah, most of the decisions that I make are driven by fear. I'm a fearful person. I don't think that I am necessarily the most anxious person I know, but I have anxious moments, and when I get anxious, girl, go by. Only me would have something really good happen to me and be like, oh God. I'm still kind of recovering and learning how to not be terrified, but I used to be really, really afraid of writing for a really long time. I was so scared of writing, and you can actually see videos of me on this channel be afraid of writing and cry. There's a lot of footage of me crying when I was like 18. Back in 2020, I think I hit the peak of fear, and I also hit the peak of, I think, of confidence in my writing. So I was simultaneously so scared, like so fucking scared of writing, but also so aware that I had a style, because I've been writing long time. I've been writing since 2014. So I was 12 years old. I have a late birthday, so I was 12 in May of 2014 is when I started writing. I started writing while I was doing, like, you know how like a lot of the times you would volunteer, I don't know, maybe other people did this, volunteer to like look after like the younger kids in different classes, like over your lunch break. So I wrote my first book, a lot of it, while my phone speaker is disgusting. Oh geez, sorry. I was in grade 7 and I was just going to like monitor these kids over lunch or whatever, and I wrote a lot of that book while doing that. It was in this little notebook, and I never stopped writing since then. I know like for some people, like people have been writing for a really long time. I obviously was writing from a really young age, but I wasn't really interested in writing up until that point. Like besides like in grade 6, there was like a creative writing unit, and I remember like loving it. I wrote about a pirate. Now thinking back, like that was like the gayest thing I could have written about. It was like a really gay pirate. I don't know. But that was like the moment for me. It wasn't just like a little story that I'd written down, because obviously a lot of kids write stories. That was like, oh, okay, this is the beginning of my career, which is really funny to think about now because it was a really shitty story. I haven't stopped writing since then, and I started developing a fear about writing. Actually, it took a while. So 2014, I wrote that first book, and then that summer I wrote, this is like the backstory, my whole writing journey, I guess, is what I'm talking about at 4:19 instead of writing, because I just felt like talking to something, and this is what I'm doing. That summer, I then wrote a couple of other novellas. I'm writing a novella right now, which I'm constituting as my first novella, but it's actually not. So the first book I wrote was Sophie and Jake, Lord, assassin, but she didn't have a personality. An assassin, if the assassin was like a Sharpie marker, you know, like that level of interesting, but it's okay. The second book I wrote, the novella, was that The Dreamer? I think so. That was quite long. I think that was almost 20,000 words, if not 20,000. And then right after that, probably only took me like a month to write. Then right after that, I wrote The Treated. And then after that, I started writing my first novel, which is really stupid that I can be like, I started writing my first novel when I was 12. It sounds ridiculous, but it's true. School started. I started writing Fostered. I also started writing a book called This Is Where the End Starts, I think, which was definitely, the title was just stolen from The Strokes. The end has no end, but like This Is Where the End Starts. I was a real big Strokes. Actually, no, it wasn't stolen from The Strokes. Maybe it was, because I can't remember when I titled that book, because I started listening to, now I'm talking about The Strokes, jeez. I started listening to The Strokes when I was 15. So I was 13 when I started writing This Is Where the End Starts, but I wonder maybe I titled it. I must have titled it after. Anyway, so that November I started writing that book, and of course I started writing Fostered in October. started writing This Is Where the End Starts in November, and I was writing those 2 books simultaneously. And then in that new year, I finished Fostered in January 3rd, started book 2 like right after, like January 15th or something. And then it was like just a Fostered new year. I finished book 2 in May, and I started book 3 in May, and I just kept writing that. I also started a book that summer, also in that May, called I'm Disappointed, which kind of overtook Fostered. And I actually quit writing Fostered in October. And that takes us back to fear. Something happened to book 3 of Fostered in October, and I started feeling there's some sort of feeling that I hadn't felt before. And I'm telling all of you, like, all of this so you know the backstory of like, when did it get to a point where I started to be afraid of writing? That was the point. Like, there's this point in book 3 when I started high school, when I entered high school starts for me in grade 9. I was 14. That October, Fostered book 3 just stopped working. I had gotten to like 100,000 words in the manuscript. And I got to a point that I loved. Lonan was like screwed in the plot. It was great because whenever he got screwed in the plot, you knew like the juicy tea was like coming out, because he's just such a mess in that book, and it's so fun because like him and Reeve like created this great siblingship, because they didn't know they were siblings until like halfway through that book. So then they create this like allyship after being enemies the whole time. So it was really fun. If something bad happened to Lonan, like, you know, Reeve would feel something about it because that's his sister. I thought, you know, this is gonna be the best part of the book to write. No, it was not the best part of the book to write. I was looking forward to it, and something just clicked off. I don't know if it was because I was afraid of screwing it up, or like the momentum had gotten off, like, because this was like a scene that I'd wanted to write for a really long time. Like, I don't know what happened. It just didn't end up working out. And I had been writing I'm Disappointed, so I just kind of ended up giving up on Fostered completely. I didn't think I was going to write it anymore, and it upset me. I was like, what do I do if I can never write with Harrison, Lonan, Reeve, and Foster ever again? Because that was who I was writing with, like, and that was my whole life, and I'd already written 300,000 words in that series in just a matter of months. It wasn't even a year, basically. Well, I guess at that point it was a year. It freaked me out and it upset me, but I was already writing another book. I mean, 14-year-old me was a slay. She was like, I'm afraid of writing this one. Let me just pivot to another book. And I wrote I'm Disappointed, which was why a contemporary, so I pivoted, and I didn't think I was going to write the series ever again. But that was the first moment of fear. I think over that break, I had tried writing Fostered book 3, actually in Foster's point of view, because something wasn't working. Like, the book just, like, it collapsed. Something happened to me. I it freaked me out or something, and it just didn't end up working out. The book collapsed, and I was like, let me just write it in a different point of view. Maybe that'll help me. And for some reason, I picked Foster. Like, justice for Harrison. Like, Harrison should have narrated the rest of it. But Foster was a really important character in the earlier books, and it still didn't work out. I don't know. And again, I was focusing on I'm Disappointed. I was trying to polish that book. I was entering pitch competitions because I wanted to publish that book. I'm Disappointed. If you were around for the I'm Disappointed pitch contest days, oh my God, please tell me, because I was on Tumblr. I started my blog that February. I actually that summer got back into book 3 of Fostered, and managed to fix it, basically. Like, I managed to continue writing it, and that's why that book is 200,000 words long. I added a character, and it kind of added this huge, like, layer of plot, and my neighbors are screaming over there. I mean, it's not like they're having a good time. So I kind of got over that fear, and that was great. Then I pivoted into book 4 of Foster that July, because I finished book 3, and I just immediately started before no rest for the weekend. And so, something similar happened with the fear. I was like, I had kind of introduced like a really like serious plot thread to Fostered, and it really changed Reeve, and it really changed the group dynamics. And at first I was like excited about this new kind of endeavor to like go through, and then it changed something so broadly about the book that it freaked me out of, like, with writing this book. And I was quite afraid, because I actually went into this video thinking that I didn't start getting afraid of writing until I was like maybe 16 or 17. No, I was afraid the entire time. Jeez, oh no. I remember crying a lot when writing that book, because I regretted like the direction I'd taken the series. I was like, what did I do? Like, I've ruined this thing that I love so much. Like, and I feel stuck, because back then a big thing for me was like, if I made a decision and I told one person about it, like, I can't change it, which is so stupid. You can change whatever you want, which is funnily something I didn't learn until I wrote Seventh Virtue. So when did I start writing book 4? 2017. I don't know. It took me until 2022 to realize I can change what I want, to be honest, in my writing. So hopefully I saved you some years of contemplation. I did manage to finish that book. I think I finished it in October, sometime in that fall. But it was a terrible experience because I was so afraid the entire time. I started book 5. Book 5 was the same thing. Basically, like the same fear, the same discomfort, the same, oh God, something is like severely wrong, you know, like, and I don't know what to do. And I'm just like really afraid of this. And I can't get out of it. And like, but I kept going, like, and that's still admirable that I kept going. But I was freaked out the entire time. I thought this was going to get better. Oh my God. Anyway, I started book 6 in October. I started in October of 2017 and I finished it in April of 2019. So it took me a really long time to write that book. And book 6 of Fostered is like 70,000 words. So it's pretty short. And it was really atypical of the other books because I started to find a bit of a style. Literary fiction I like really fell in love with. I read The Girls by Emma Cline. It became my entire personality. But before then, I had already started developing this like really literary style. And I think reading some literary fiction made me realize what it was. And it helped me kind of understand what I was trying to do. And it like really clicked into place. But the problem was book 6 was so dystopian in the beginning. Like the plot of book 6 was so interesting. I didn't realize what it actually was. The plot is that, if I can remember, Lonan and Foster have created like an alliance in book 6 or something. And so they have this whole problem where they're like people coming after them, just the two of them, like everybody else is fine. But Lonan and Foster are like screwed in book 6. That kind of causes an issue. I don't really remember what. So then there's like conflict, like their conflict like imprints on like sort of Reeve, and then Reeve like has Darren is in that book. Darren comes in book 5. If you have no idea who these people are, Lord, okay, I'm just talking as if everybody knows what I'm talking about. But niche content. Darren ends up trying to like help Reeve because she's like struggling a lot. And so they spend like the whole book together. And like that's basically the whole plot. And then Darren realizes like his family's fucked up, as he should. Book 6 just kind of was very different because it was very literary, but also dystopian. Like the Lonan and Foster plot was like very dystopian, and then the Darren and Reeve side of things was like very literary. So it was kind of confusing, and the confusion only made me more afraid. And also at the time, like book 6 was the first book where Lonan and Harrison became canon. I had started shipping them. Oh God. There's a lot of content from when I've been shipping them for a long time. Basically since the beginning of time. This was the first book where they became canon too. So there was like a lot to balance. And they were like canon in a like non-canon way. I ended up finishing it a lot earlier because I wanted to write this book called Houses with Teeth. I was like, I just want to shift into this like new Reeve book. I don't want to fit like, I'm tired of writing book 6 basically. I'd been writing it for nearly 2 years. So to be fair, I was tired. And I also think a big part of it was like, this book wasn't like really working. A lot of it wasn't working. It wasn't coming together. I was changing a lot as a writer. I found my writing style, or like, you know, I was aware of what my writing style was in 2018. That was when I was still writing book 6. I was doing a lot of reading in my genre, and I was really aware of what I'd been building, this writing style I'd been building at that time. And it was scary because I was like, I can see two sides of the writer that I am and the writer that I was. The writer who was writing a lot of plot-driven, dialogue-driven work, like in Fostered's book 1 to 5, and then the writer that I kind of want to be in the future, who's writing a lot of literary and writing a lot of internal character work. And funnily, I'm both now. I do both, but that's kind of where I was. And I just wanted to write a project where I could kind of explore what I was interested in writing the most, which was literary. So I kind of rushed the end of book 6, and then I never wrote Houses with Teeth because it scared me. That book scared me. And at the time, I was also writing moth work. Let's say I finished book 6 in April. I started writing moth work unseriously in January of that year, so just a couple months before, but I wasn't writing it frequently. It was just like ever so often I was adding a little chapter. But then in that summer, my therapist was like, you need a goal. this summer and like a reach goal. So I think must have been in June or something. I'd come up with this thing. Let me write moth work. In that time, like from April to June, I was like too afraid to write anything. I wasn't really writing much. Obviously, moth work, we're getting to the timeline. I was 17 now. I moved to university in August and I finished my first year and I was still writing moth work. Moth work took me from, I don't know, it took me I think 6 months to write. So whenever 6 months was till I finished it in March, so whatever 6 months before that was, I think. So, but a lot of it I was scared of the writing, because I was like, I found my writing style in that 2018. It was that year, like 2018, like I had found my writing style, and then when 2019 came I was like, okay, fine, like it needs to be that style, if not like it's bad or whatever. And mothwork wasn't that style. So I was like, this must be bad. And I have a lot of Tumblr posts and I'm sure YouTube videos of me talking like, I don't understand like why I don't like the writing. I feel like I peaked when I was 16 and like I'll never be as good as I was. And I feel like I was a much better writer before. And it's literally only a couple months later. But I was writing in a different style. It was a different point of view. I'd written a lot of first person present tense, like only first person present tense with Reeve for the whole series. And then mothwork was the first time writing a different point of view, which was third person present tense. And so it was a different style. It's not going to be the exact same voice either. It's Harrison. Like he's not going to be the same. Reeve, like that man is not picking up on things in mothwork. And same thing with when I shifted into Lonan's point of view. It also scared me because I had added it very impulsively. I was like, let me just add Lonan because it'll be fun if I have Lonan. And I remember when I did, I was like, oh God, I've ruined something, which is a normal reaction to adding Lonan into anything. That's a joke. It was a different style. It's a different character. It's a different voice. He's going to pick up on different things. And now fan is on. So it's going to be even worse audio, as if this is the worst video to exist ever. I was so insecure about mothwork that it took until literally 2023 of me rereading it. So I finished it in early 2020 to actually look at it and be like, this was nothing to be insecure about at all. And as a result of my insecurity, mothwork is the best book I've ever written in terms of like how tight it is. Like it's very tight, especially chapters 1 to 6 are so tight. Like the themes, the plot, the mirroring, the symbolism, like wow, it's really tight because I had it revised the crap out of it out of like embarrassment and fear go hand in hand with me, because I was embarrassed by it. I was like, this is cringe. At the time I was just embarrassed to write anything that, you know, I felt people could poke holes in, and I felt all my writing was pokeable, even though I'd gone through first year, and in first year I developed this confidence because I had other people telling me I was a good writer. And this is the first time other people that weren't, you know, my sister was telling me, you know, you're good at this, you know. And I knew that I was a good writer going into my program, but I also knew I had some development to do. It was like I knew I was on the right track, but I wasn't 100% there. And so people were telling, my TAs were telling me, my profs were telling me, you're a good writer, you're a good writer, you're a good writer. And it was great. But then there's also this like fear of like, okay, I'm a good writer, so I can't fuck up. I can't be cringe. I can't be bad because I'm a good writer now. I finished mothwork in March. And I remember, you know, I was like, oh, hey, like I have this book, and I was proud of it for the week after I finished it. And then right after that, I just hated it. I was like, this is so embarrassing. And I was really wrong about that. I wish I could tell myself back then. But I started Feeding Habits in April of that year, right after I finished mothwork, because I was too afraid to write Houses of Teeth again. The common denominator between 17-year-old me, 18-year-old me, 19-year-old me, 20-year-old me, 21-year-old me, we all are too afraid to write Houses with Teeth. So I wrote Feeding Habits to procrastinate. Feeding Habits I fucking hated. You guys, a lot of you would have been here for writing Feeding Habits. Let me know if you were. I hated writing that book. I was so scared writing that book. Everything wasn't turning out the way that it was. Writing a chapter felt like giving my soul to the devil. It didn't feel good. It was bad. I felt every single thing I was writing wasn't working out. The first page of that book is the only page where I felt like I was being tormented by my writing. Otherwise, tormented as hell. I was scared the whole time. I was in Lonan's head, and again, I just started to get this feeling of this is so bad, this is cringe, this is embarrassing. And I still feel that way about Feeding Habits, to be honest. The Lonan chapters, I struggle to like even now. But I have to remind myself, because I know all these things now. I'm wiser now. I'm not going to like create my whole worth based off of now, like in 2023. I'm not going to define my worth as a writer over like 5 chapters. Back then, I really was. it was so personal for me. Like, genuinely speaking, writing started really hindering my mental health, but I also relied on it really immensely for my mental health. I mean, the pandemic had just started at that time. Like, I really needed writing at that time. I just finished first year and everything, and I always relied on my writing for my mental health. It's the reason why a lot of the stuff that I write exists. I mean, Mothwork wouldn't exist without that. Book I'm writing right now, Body Back, wouldn't exist without that. Every book I've basically written wouldn't exist without, I need it for something. Yeah, I took it very personally when it wasn't working out. Like, I remember writing chapter 3. The chapter 3 of Feeding Habits that I've shared bits of on my blog, maybe in my videos. Oh my God, that was so hard. Hi, Bug. It was so hard to write. I started that thing. I deleted that thing. I have so much of Feeding Habits just deleted. Like, a lot of that book doesn't, it never saw the light of day because I wasn't happy with it. I kept deleting it. I could never keep forward with it. And Feeding Habits took me a long time to finish. I finished in 2022, but it was, it was the project that I was working on for all of 2020, basically the rest of 2020. It was the project I was writing up until May for all of 2021, because I started writing Seventh Virtue in May of 2021. So there was a little bit of extra something that I could jump into. And it was only when I wrote Seventh Virtue, which was a plea basically to myself, a cry of desperation, the reason why I wrote that book, because I was tired of feeling so bad about my writing. I was tired of not having fun in my writing. I was tired of being afraid of all the time. I was tired of being so scared and people judging me, and nobody was judging me. It was just me. I had shared, a couple of chapters of Feeding Habits actually as audiobooks, which you can still find. I never took them down because apparently there are people who still listen to those. I was very surprised. I was actually about to take them down. I've been meaning to take them down since I posted them. But people still comment on them, and I just don't. I know what it's like to a thing you really like on the internet somebody took down, so I'm not going to take it down. But I do the first 4 chapters. While nobody was judging me negatively, actually, I was getting a lot of positive feedback. I was so embarrassed, I think, to have those chapters on the internet. I love sharing my writing. I think sharing your writing is a great thing to do if you want to do it. And when I went to my first therapist, she was like, "Why didn't you share your writing?" And I was like, "I don't want to. I'm so afraid." And she was like, "Create a Wattpad." That was what I did that, and I actually didn't really post anything to Wattpad, but for me, I think I had wanted to share, and I've talked about this before, I wanted to share those chapters because it was fun. I shared the first one and people had really positive feedback, and I was like, oh, people like this. This is something that I've been struggling to write and people really like it. And so I was like, do you guys want a chapter 2? People wanted a chapter 2. I kept posting them. By the time I got to chapter 3, posting them was so terrifying. I think a lot of it is because I don't like my reading voice. So not only was I embarrassed by the book and by Lonan and by the things that were happening in Feeding Habits, I was also embarrassed to listen to myself read it. And I actually like my voice, but I, for some reason, when I read things and record me reading, I can't. It's the most embarrassing thing in the entire world. And I actually think I'm a good reader, and I think I could be a great narrator, and I think I do a great job at reading. So it's not that I don't like that. I just don't like listening to it again. But my videos, I'll if I'm just talking normally like this, my voice is fine. It's just the reading voice when I got very serious, and I'm like, oh God, this is it's very embarrassing to me. So I just couldn't handle it. And that really, I think, not tainted, but it changed the drafting experience for Feeding Habits for Lonan's chapters for me, because I kept thinking about, oh God, this is kind of embarrassing. What if people, what would people react to this? And I kept thinking, oh no, I'm afraid. I'm too afraid to write this because what if it's bad? It's why I never finished uploading the chapters, even though I have chapters 5 and I have chapter 6. So I have the last Lonan chapter and I have the first Harrison chapter recorded. I must have deleted those files. The sun is out. How beautiful. Something I've been thinking a lot about the last couple of days is some of the days of writing Feeding Habits were the best days of my life. I have a vlog, I think it was from May 2020, where I was here on my deck. I was writing and I was listening to Grace by Jeff Buckley, his album. It was for the first time I was just listening to it because I had really liked Lover You Should Have Come Over, being very stingy and careful about how much I listened to his music. And then one day I think I must have been listening to it and then the entire album played while I was writing, and I just kept going because I really liked the album. And I'll never forget one of the last couple of days I've been trying to recreate this day where I came out on my deck and I was just listening to that album and I was writing all day. I actually did that yesterday. It was lovely. Feeding Habits still suck. No matter how many good days I had, writing that book just was painful. I didn't really focus on it after May of 2021 because Seventh Virtue took precedent, and Seventh Virtue is the first book where I was like, oh, I actually don't need to be afraid of writing all the time. If you didn't watch the video where I wrote 10,000 words, 11,000 actually, of that words of that book in a day, I did it because I was tired of feeling afraid. I wanted to just do something because I was like, it's okay if it's bad. Who cares? Like, this is one day of my life. Like, what does it matter? You know, like, it's writing. And I didn't hate it, and I didn't think I would finish the book, but I did. And because I loved it. It was a lot of fun. I came back to feeding habits. Oh, Lord, I can't remember. Oh, I must have only touched feeding habits once in 2021. That summer, I spent like a month writing Initial Condition. I added a new chapter to feeding habits. That was the first time I'd ever added something into a book that I'd already written. As a pantser, I found like a bit of a sacred process in terms of like, I don't want to ever mess my first draft up, which is dumb. But like, for some reason, like, especially with Mothwork and feeding habits, I was very precious about it. Like, I didn't want to like change anything about those drafts, even though it was like causing me stress. And if I just changed it, it wouldn't stress me out. So finally, a year after I started writing that book, I went back and I added Initial Condition. And by that point, I was in Harrison's point of view. And Harrison was such a pain to write because I didn't understand his psychology. I do now. Unfortunately, I really do understand his psychology. And it was just too hard, and I was afraid all the time. And I was like, oh God, this sucks. So then I just focused on Seventh Virtue. And Seventh Virtue, no fear. Like, that book, I did not question myself. I didn't struggle. It was just so fucking good writing that book the entire time. I loved it. Even the times I did struggle, I was like, whatever. Like, it'll be fine. I finished Feeding Habits in June of 2022 after writing a new chapter 7 and then writing like a new chapter 10. And that was great. And it was the first time where I'd written that book without as much fear. All of that to say, writing Seventh Virtue, which is my fantasy book, really changed fear. And I started developing this thing, and you'd hear it in my advice too, whether on my blog or whether on here. It's like, yeah, but like, it's okay to be afraid when writing. Everybody's afraid when writing, and like, you're gonna be fine, basically, is kind of the advice that I give like sometimes. And I'd been following that, and I was able to take that advice and digest that advice when I was writing Seventh Virtue, because writing Seventh Virtue didn't scare me at all. So of course, saying to myself, well, it's fine, everybody's scared of writing. Saying that when I was writing the book that didn't scare me, of course I'm not, everybody's scared of writing, because I'm like, yeah, everybody is scared of writing. Like, I'm not even struggling with this book. Like, it's totally fine. Like, I feel like because I'm making fun of myself right now. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm a really good writer, and like, you just have to be confident, and like, everybody is afraid and you'll get over it, basically. Okay, well, that's easy to say when you're writing a book that doesn't scare you at all. But to be fair, I've held that, and it's good. It's good to have confidence. I'm making fun of myself only because I'm sure it must be annoying sometimes to hear somebody say, yeah, but everybody feels that way. You're going to be fine. And I don't phrase my advice that way. I hope, if I've ever phrased my advice that way to you, I'm sorry. That's not what I mean. It's just like, I know what it's like to be so afraid of your writing. And I think because I started writing Seventh Virtue, it showed me that that's not me. It doesn't have to be actually my process. I can actually enjoy this thing. But that's been my perspective, basically. Like, well, I'm a good writer. I'm confident. I know that I'll figure out writing eventually. So I've been really confident about my work since I started writing Seventh Virtue. So since May of 2021, I've been really quite confident in my process. And then this thing happened, and something in me shifted. And I don't want to talk about the thing because it doesn't matter. Something changed in me, and I've been writing this novella called Body Back since late February, and I love it. It's the best thing I've ever written, and I was confident, at points when I was writing chapter 3, which is actually the best thing I've ever written. Go read it. I have a writing update. It's called 24 Karat Harrison, that chapter. It's the best thing I've ever written ever in my entire life. But even points writing that, I was like not feeling confident. I was like, oh, I'm fucking this up. But then I kept managing to talk myself through it, and that was fine. I just, for the first time, just very recently, I started to feel this fear again. And a lot of it has to do with my future as a writer. I have had immense existentialism and fear about where I'm going to end up as a writer, since basically it's all related to graduation. If you didn't know, I just finished my Bachelor of Arts in creative writing. Since September, I've been like tormented with fear of like, what am I going to do when I graduate? I don't know. And it's just something that I'm just not ready to talk about right now. But like, I've been scared for a really long time about that. And like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? I've been feeling that way again. And it's not a good feeling. And a lot of it is a lot of this is autism, and it's just makes a lot of, I mean, it's just me. Like, it's gonna be, I have to be patient with myself. I have to be understanding of myself, and also understand why my brain is coming to this, this fear, is because everything in my life is changing right now, and everybody is afraid. A lot of people are afraid after they graduate. So I know I'm not alone, but I'm feeling that a lot right now with my writing. Like, what am I gonna do? It's really sucked, because for the first time in 3 years, really, because the last time I felt like really bad fear, like paralyzing fear regarding my writing, was 2020. And to be there again was like so scary. I hyped myself up yesterday. I was like, come on, Rachel, get up, get your computer, you can write. I wrote 2,000 words yesterday, which is great. It's a lot of words for body back. It's the most amount of words I've written in a day for that novella. And I love this novella so much, but because I've had this fearful wave, there's something that's like I'm aware of now when I'm drafting. It's like, I don't know. It's like this worry that it'll happen again. And it's not that this book it's not the same thing with like Feeding Habits, where I was just like scared the entire time I was drafting. I'm not scared when I draft body back. I'm just scared. I'm just scared in general right now. If you feel that way too, like, it's like I said, it's normal, but it's not easy. Like, I'm not going to say that it's easy. And it never was easy. Even when, writing became not scary at all for me when I started writing Seventh Virtue, it was never easy. I don't know. There's something really isolating and terrifying about being scared of your writing, because you're the only person who can fix it. And you're also the only person experiencing it. So how can you fix something that you don't even want to address because it's scary to address, but also you're the only person who can fix it, and the only way to fix it is to address it? It's kind of what I've had to deal with over the last couple of days. It's what I've been thinking about, and I've been really kind of quiet with my writing everywhere right now. Like, I'm not making videos right now. Something just scared me, I think. I've been like really quite, like, I don't know, I've been keeping the writing to me. I don't even know what the point of this whole conversation is. I just talked you through my entire writing journey, how I've always, I guess, been a fearful writer. And even when I don't have moments of fear, I had a good 2 years of minimal fear. Now that I'm having it again, I'm like, I have to remind myself that just because I'm fearful now doesn't mean, I think a lot of it was like, I was more scared that I was scared again of writing, because I was like, I don't know if I can make it through that. And what I've been reminding myself is, just because you're afraid of writing right now does not mean you were the writer you were 3 years ago. I am a lot wiser than I was 3 years ago. I'm a lot smarter than I was 3 years ago. I'm a better writer than I was 3 years ago. And I also am a gentler writer to myself than I was 3 years ago. I was very cruel to myself as a writer 3 years ago. Now I am a lot kinder, and I have to remind myself that just because I'm afraid now and I haven't been afraid in a couple of years doesn't mean, like, I have the skills now. Like, that doesn't mean that I'm gonna be stuck like the way I was when I was writing Feeding Habits. I never want to feel that way again. That sucked. Like, when I was writing that book, it sucked. I'm just trying to remind myself, you don't actually have to feel that way again, because you know things that you didn't know back then. And I think what was scarier for me, I was like, what if I'm going backwards? What if I'm going back to that place? I don't know if I can survive that place again, because it was really hard. I know that I can now because I know things. I had to go through those things so I could learn these things that I know now that are going to help me. But that doesn't make it any less scary. So yeah, it's just kind of this video channel update. If we just want to shift, I am still not feeling like I really want to make videos right now. It's not having anything to do with you guys. I love you guys and I love making videos, but I'm just not. Usually around this time, maybe it's because I do a lot of vocalization, like when I was in workshop, like for the last 2 years, around this time I start to get really tired and burnt out, because I've been using a lot of my speech, is what I'm trying to say. It makes me really tired, so I can't really, like, I need some time to recover because I'm burning out. I'm actively forcing myself not to make videos, and I don't know why I made this one. I just felt like talking about fear and kind of processing what I've been thinking about the last couple of days. That's this video. There's a really loud bird. So I'm gonna write body back now. I'm scared as fuck to see where the rest of this book goes, because I finished this like part that I was really comfortable and confident in when I was writing 24 Karat Harrison. I knew exactly what I needed to do, and even the parts, Lord have mercy, there has been a blackbird that's been flying since yesterday past my head. I am so afraid of birds. I'm like Lone and Clark behavior. Go away. Anyways, I knew what to do with 24 Karat Harrison. Now I'm in No Christ, which is chapter 4, and I'm like, I don't know what's happening, which is the whole point. Like, No Christ is supposed to be that way. So, you know, if I'm feeling that way, Harrison's going to feel that way. The narrative is going to feel that way. It's going to end up working out. But I've been nervous about finishing this book. It's taken me a lot longer than I wanted it to. It's taken me almost 3 months. Now I look like a toucan with my hair like this. So I think I will stop rambling to you. That's this video. Thank you for watching. It's okay to be afraid. See you guys later. Bye.